Playing Nirvana.
The Cobain 50.
Nirvana.
Kurt Cobain's top 50 albums.
Nirvana.
From listener-powered KEXP.
This is the Cobain 50 from listener-powered KEXP. I'm Dusty Henry.
And I'm Martin Douglas. This week, Dusty dives into the album Damaged by Black Flag, which came out in 1981. As a running joke in this series, it's usually me who is the one who says, this is one of my favorite albums of all time. But I know that this is actually one of your favorite albums.
Yeah, definitely. I think I've referenced a few times like Black Flag being such a pivotal band for me, like even more like philosophically than even the music.
Yeah.
But this one in particular, this is the one that grabbed me and is near and dear to my heart. Just a pivotal album in hardcore punk that really, you say a lot of albums change the game forever, but like this is one that I think actually did. And it might be up there with another Black Flag album we covered already, My War.
Oh, yeah.
84, which we kind of did in reverse order because, you know, we're so rebellious.
All right. Without further ado, here's Dusty covering Damaged on the Cobain 50.
New York, 1981. Black Flag are playing an impromptu show at a local bar. There's a young man in the crowd who always comes to their East Coast shows. Not just any young man, but an assistant manager at Haagen-Dazs. Yes, the ice cream shop Haagen-Dazs. He drove all the way up from Washington, D.C. and would need to drive back that same night to make it back in time for his next shift. Knowing he'd have to be at work in just a few hours, he requested the band play the song Clocked In. Before playing the song, the band's vocalist at the time, Des Cadena, looked at our young ice cream purveyor in the crowd and asked him if he wanted to sing it instead. The young man seized the moment, jumped on stage, and gave a brutally furious 90-second performance. He left the band and the audience stunned. Afterward, he got off the stage, jumped in his car, and headed back to D.C. Not long after, the band asked the man if he'd consider giving up slinging ice cream to sing in Black Flag. And who was that man? None other than Albert Einstein. Wait, no, I mean Henry Rollins.
Gimme, gimme, gimme! I need some more! Gimme, gimme, gimme! Don't ask what for! 1, 2, 3, 4! Stand here like a loaded gun, waiting to go off! I've got nothing to do but shoot my mouth off! Gimme, gimme, gimme! Gimme some more!
This origin story is about as canon to hardcore punk rock as Superman crash landing in Smallville, Kansas. It was the beginning of Rollins' story, but not the beginning of Black Flag's. Prior to Rollins jumping on stage, Black Flag had plenty of history. By this point, they were already on their third singer. The band started in 1976 in Hermosa Beach, founded by guitarist Greg Ginn. If we're extending the superhero metaphors, Ginn would be more akin to Batman, but, you know, with far more angst towards billionaires. He was a tinkerer. He owned his own electronics company that he would later convert into SST Records, the punk rock label that not only released Black Flag's material, but also key records from the Minutemen, Soundgarden, Sonic Youth, and so many others. Black Flag emerged with a firm ethos. As brash and messy as their music was, they worked tirelessly and rehearsed endlessly. The riffs were faster, nastier, and meaner than the punk rock that was coming from the UK, with bands like Sex Pistols and The Clash. They were creating a style of music that would later become known as hardcore.
1, 2, 3!
the part that hurts and let the rest remain.
Gin's brother Raymond Pettibon gave the band an iconic image with their logo. 4 unaligned black bars, meant to resemble a waving flag. Pettibon ended up making all the band's album artwork, and he would hand-draw grotesque images for show flyers, which the band would plaster all across Los Angeles. Their first singer was Keith Morris, making his debut on the incendiary Nervous Breakdown EP in 1979.
I'm about to have a nervous breakdown. My head really hurts. If I don't find a way out of here, I'm gonna go berserk. I'm crazy and I'm hurt.
It's one of the greatest debuts in punk rock, but it just couldn't last. Morris left citing creative differences and, cocaine. Things eventually worked out for Morris, though. He'd end up fronting influential groups like Circle Jerks and much later, Off. Morris was then replaced by Ron Reyes. Reyes also recorded just one EP with the band in 1980, titled Jealous Again.
You're jealous again. No, she's just a friend. Why can't I do anything without being yelled at? Always on the phone. Never leave me alone. Why don't you just tell me what you want?
Reyes quit mid-performance during a show in 1980, put off by the violence he was seeing happening in the crowd. With Reyes out, Des Cadena joined the band and took over vocals.
I see my place in American ways. Face red choices I can do. American ways, American ways. I'm my own, I see my place. I'm alone, on the way out. Smart enough, it's all spelled out.
Cadena has one of the longer tenures in Black Flag. As you might already tell, there's a lot of turnover in Black Flag. Gin was really the only consistent member. In the band's first 10 years before, spoiler alert, they first broke up, the band went through 16 different lineups with 17 different musicians. And while Cadena lasted longer than most, his stint as vocalist was short. By the time Black Flag was playing the show where Rollins requested clocked in, Cadena was already thinking about ditching the singing gig to just play guitar. Seeing Rollins fill the role so naturally felt like the perfect opportunity to pass the torch. Which brings us back to Rollins. His arrival ushered in one of the band's biggest and boldest eras. But who was this guy beyond a punk with an ice cream job? Rollins grew up in D.C., raised by his mother. He says he's not seen his father since he was 18. Rollins went to an all-male prep school, which instilled a rigid sense of discipline in him. In many ways, this discipline is Rollins' X factor. While punk thrives on anarchy and rebellion, Rollins was always militant in his approach. Notoriously serious in his early days and constantly working out. Other punks often looked scrawny and disheveled. But Rollins was buff and intense. DC, of course, already had its own notorious punk scene. DC gave us bands like Bad Brains, The Fate, it's also the scene that would give us future Nirvana drummer Dave Grohl, who came up drumming for the band Scream.
It's a Friday night, and I'm flat on my back. I'm burnt out from the working week, but I'm much too wide to sleep.
Rollins' best friend growing up was Ian MacKaye. He went on to form bands like Minor Threat and Fugazi.
I am a patient boy. Wait. My time to wanna start a train.
MacKaye would become an icon himself, also focused on his goals and ethics within the punk scene and organizing protest performances in the nation's capital. He'd also co-found Discord Records, something of a spiritual twin to SST Records on the opposite coast. Rollins says he and MacKaye found punk together, likely thanks to a Sex Pistols record. Seeing bands like Bad Brains play in their hometown inspired MacKaye to start his own group, Teen Idols.
You're the ticket of the minute of veins and you. Take a risk, take a bit of you and you. Got the big
Teen Idol started to take off and tour, Rollins tagged along with the band as a roadie. He reportedly even jumped on the stage with the band at least once and auditioned to be their vocalist, though ultimately he didn't get the gig. This became something of a trend for Rollins, as HR from Bad Brains would bring him up to sing on occasion as well. Rollins' formidable force started to garner buzz. Eventually, he did start his own band in 1980, SOA, short for State of Alert. They'd put out just one EP in 1980 on Discord, titled No Policy. Their songs were fast and brief, and so were their shows. Rollins recalls most performances lasting only 11 to 14 minutes. Throughout these years of being a young punk, he'd held a candle in his heart for one band, Black Flag. Rollins has described them as his favorite band. He even became pen pals with founding bassist Chuck Dukowski, and he would let the band crash at his house when they were on the East Coast. It's why he was there that night in New York when the band decided to play a random bar after their main show for the evening. It's the sort of thing you fantasize about as a kid. Your favorite band asking you to join them on their rock and roll odyssey. Here's Rollins describing the moment he decided to join the band in a conversation with Pharrell. Yeah, that Pharrell.
One of the band members called me. They said, hey, there's a vocalist slot that has opened up. You kind of auditioned the other night. You want to come up here and really give it a go? And I'm looking at my minimum wage job, which it was a very good job. But I kind of grimly thought, well, that's going to be my life. Just these jobs that make the feet swell at the end of the day. I just reconcile myself to a life of that. Or I can go to New York on an Amtrak train and audition for my favorite band. Well, let's see. What do I have to really lose?
Not long after, Rollins quit his job, quit SOA, and moved to Los Angeles. One of the first things he did was get the Black Flag bars tattooed prominently on his bicep. There was no turning back. This was a pivotal time for Black Flag. Sure, they had released a slew of singles and EPs, but they'd yet to put out a full-length album. In fact, the band had been working on an album off and on with all of their previous singers. Before Rollins joined, they were already in the studio with producer Spot, working on the tracks that would eventually make up their debut album, Damaged. Cadena had even already recorded some of the vocals.
Understand we're fighting the war, we can't win. They hate us, we hate them. We can't win. No way.
Cadena's versions have since emerged, and honestly, they sound really good. But there's no denying there's an energy shift when Rollins came in.
Walk that Wall Street. That's the dead hall. They hit me across the head with a Billy Club. Understand, fighting the war, we can't win. They hate us, we hate them.
Rollins' vocals were as intense and muscular as his physical appearance. It felt like the band had enlisted Duke Nukem as their singer.
I'm not gonna fight you. I'm gonna kick your ass.
Switching singers and adding a second guitar dramatically changed the sound of the record. Much to the chagrin of Spot, who felt like it made the record too lo-fi. But the band wanted it that way. It's so lo-fi that you can hear drummer Robo's bracelets rattling throughout the album. The music started to sound more like their live shows.
I look in your eyes and see I will live. I wish I was dead. I don't want to think. I'm stuck here and I know it. I don't want to see. Make me close my eyes.
The whole tone of the music changed. A song like Six Pack, which Ging claims was written about original singer Morris, lost some of its dark humor and sarcasm. Rollins' whole demeanor was too serious.
I got a six-pack and nothing to do. I got a six-pack and I don't need you.
Even a relatively playful song like TV Party does manage to maintain some of the sneer especially with the rest of the band singing backing vocals. But Rollins still screams like a drill sergeant when he's yelling about Saturday Night Live.
Saturday Night Live! Monday Night Football! Jefferson! Vegas! I wouldn't be without my TV for a day! Or even a minute! Don't even bother to use my brain anymore! There's nothing left in it! We've got nothing better to do!
It really worked. His forceful but poetic spirit became intertwined with the band. Each previous singer brought something great to Black Flag, and fans will still constantly debate who their favorite singer is. But as soon as Rollins stepped in, it was clear he was in it for the long haul. I mean, as much of a long haul than anyone can have in Black Flag. He approached the role like it was his job. He was fixated, determined, and every word he spit into the mic carries that ambition. This was a new Black Flag. It's felt immediately on the Burn It All Down opener, Rise Above.
Dallas cowards, ride the cold. Rise above, we're gonna rise above. Make this score what we say. Rise above, we're gonna rise above. Try to stop what we do. Rise above, we're gonna rise above. When they can't do it themselves. Rise above, we're gonna rise above.
This song was a mission statement. We are tired of your abuse. Try to stop us, but it's no use. I can't think of a better way to describe punk rock overall. The band sounds pissed, angry, frightening. On the album's cover is a shadowy image of Rollins, shirtless, punching a shattered mirror. Blood appears to be running down his forearm. And in red, all-cap letters, damaged. Even from just a glance, the album feels dangerous.
Break the walls. Don't wanna see the blame succeed. Won't be you for people like me. My life is fantasies. If you come to the wild, break the walls.
There's hardly been a band that sounds as pissed off as Black Flag does here. In live shows, Rollins would prowl the stage, wearing only shorts, like the Incredible Hulk. The band was outright antagonistic with their audience, literally brawling with the crowd. Audience members would spit and throw bottles at the band, and Rollins egged them on and would get into fistfights. Rollins seemed to thrive on the action, the pain. In this era, hardcore punk shows didn't just feel dangerous, they were dangerous.
Thirsty and miserable. You fight to the floor. You take till you can't even see anymore. Thirsty and miserable. Always wanting more. Thirsty and miserable. Always wanting more.
While the bulk of the material had been written before Rollins joined, he does get his first writing credit with the band on the closing track, Damaged One. He even introduces himself at the top.
My name's Henry, and you're here with me now. My life is a song, yeah. It's just, you won't even let it happen. You won't let damage my attack. I need the attack on my mind.
Rollins' furious poetry is on full display. He talks about his inner turmoil and self-destruction. He seems to be even egging on the listener, telling you to look at him. It sounds like he wants to fight, or at the very least, for you to see, hear, and feel his pain. It's genuinely unnerving, frightening, and exhilarating. As the band basically falls into a noise jam, it feels in some ways like Nirvana's Nevermind hidden track, Endless, Nameless. As we documented in our previous episode on Black Flag's My War, the band had a profound impact on Kurt Cobain, Nirvana, and the Seattle scene at large. Especially with My War coming after Damaged, antagonistic to their own fans by slowing down the pace, kind of inadvertently creating grunge. Damaged is the album that would come to define hardcore. And immediately, they wanted to f*** it up. That's pretty punk. But when I think about Damaged and Nirvana, I keep coming back to anger. One of the most powerful emotions. A twisted contrast to feelings like love. Anger can be immediate, consuming. Our anger can scare ourselves and make us do crazy things. Sometimes we want to run away from our anger, escape it for fear of danger. But anger isn't bad in itself. Black Flag showed how to wield it, to turn it into a weapon against nefarious forces. To rage against systems, to let out turmoil in our hearts. For his part, Rollins has toned things down. He's no longer fighting fans, or, as we heard in the Beat Happening episode, inappropriately assaulting other bands. Rollins and Black Flag hadn't perfected their anger yet, but they showed a way to let it out. Catharsis through screaming, noise, and brutal rhythms. When I listen to Damaged, I feel power. I feel like I can let my anger out vicariously through Rollins' hulking form and attitude. We are all damaged people. Bands like Black Flag and Nirvana tapped into that feeling. To recognize the torment we feel, to channel the power it can give, and through that, we can feel less alone.
And I just can't stand watching you self-destruct.
You just heard Dusty diving deep into one of his favorite albums, Damaged by Black Flag.
You know, it's funny. Like, this is an album I wish that I could say I got into when I was like really young, and like it's so perfect for that. Like with like teenage angst that may or may not pay off well. Like it's so ready for that, you know. But I came into it in my like kind of early 20s, mid 20s. I was working a desk job that I didn't really care for at the time. Wasn't really doing what I wanted to do, and I just felt all this angst, and I really, for some reason, fell into Black Flag. And I think I read Henry Rollins' Get in the Van around that time too. And it ended up being a perfect time. Like, I wished it was teenage years, but it kind of found me when I needed it, of the feelings of resistance and pushing against the systems, you know, pushing against Microsoft Outlook. And I just became like what the band symbolized, and also reading Our Band Could Be Your Life by Michael Azerrad. It just like reawakened that teenage angst in a way, and it reminded me who I am and what I stand for and what I believe in. And so now when I see the black bars, the 4 black bars that predate KEXP, I always think about that. I think about authenticity. I think about trueness. I think about working hard for the things you believe in. 'Cause this, as dirty and grungy and distorted and punk as Black Flag is, they are one of the hardest working bands that it ever was.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say that I think it is a fitting context that you got super into Black Flag while working a desk job you didn't love, because it feels like a good way to unwind and let out all of this pent up frustration from whatever your job is. Yeah. I've definitely had a few albums that I really got into when working various jobs, whether it was fashion retail or at a supermarket, because you need those albums to, like you said, get a sense of who you are and what you believe in, but also like get that sense of like, this man. Yes. You got to get out that frustration. Like, this is not where I want to be in life. And I think Damaged is such a great document of that.
Yeah. And I think it helped me reframe what punk was for myself, because I honestly, I felt like a poser, like getting into the band so late, listening to them like I'm at my desk, like, sure, I'll get that copy to you by 4 p.m. And then it's like, rise above in my headphones. But it reminded me that it's not, that punk isn't, as like we've talked about many times, it's not how you dress or being a certain type of style of music or anything. It's a spirit, it's an idea. And yeah, that's just really like, from then on, like I always loved punk music as an idea, but that's what it really became a part of me, I feel like. And, you know, for many people, I think this was their introduction into hardcore punk as well. Like, this is the hardcore punk album in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say about myself that I didn't like hardcore until well into adulthood. Like, I'm talking like maybe mid-30s.
Yeah.
Like, by my mid-30s, I would say the only hardcore punk bands that I liked were Bad Brains and Minor Threat. And listening to Damaged for the first time, I was like, oh, wait, I get hardcore now.
Yeah.
I understand the appeal. I understand why there to this day is still such a huge community around this style of music. It's because it's so galvanizing, even though, like, unlike a band like Minor Threat or even Bad Brains, the two hardcore bands that I mentioned, obviously, where it was kind of like there was a sense of uplift. Like, I think that Black Flag is on the opposite end of that spectrum, where kind of teetering on nihilism, but also not exactly going there, where it's like, not like the world is f***ed and I don't care. It's the world is f***ed and I'm really frustrated about it. That is the emotional foundation of this album that has carried on over 40 years in the future.
Absolutely. Like you said earlier, it's a vent. It's venting. Like, it's getting all this like bottled up frustration. How could you not be frustrated when you look at the world, you know, unless you're, you know, in an incredibly privileged situation, like, I don't know, a billionaire or something. Maybe life is good. But
yeah, we are heading headlong into election season here in the United States. And yeah, like, this is one of those things where the sentiment of damage, of feeling under the thumb of these great powers, for lack of a better term, this is a great way to express your frustration, even if it's just listening to it in the car and screaming along, even not even screaming along, drumming on your steering wheel, whatever.
Absolutely. And I think about Black Flag being a contrast to, like, album came in 81. That's like the beginning of Ronald Reagan's era. And the image that's portrayed in the mass media at that time is it's morning in America. Everything is delightful and wonderful. And, you know, this band is like in Southern California, sunshine, surfing, Hollywood. And then those are very surface level projections, or Black Flag represented what is really going on for most people.
Yeah.
Beneath that veneer, beneath that sheen, it's, I don't know. I think every time I go to LA, I think about Black Flag. I was there recently, and like, you can go to really beautiful parts, and then you can go to parts where you see like, this is not, the cookie crumbles, you know?
Yeah. But yeah, let's talk about how that works its way into the music. Greg Ginn, such a phenomenal, fantastic, very far-reaching guitar player. Like, I'm thinking of like a lot of his later stuff, but like, to get to the later stuff, you had to go through Damaged, where he's just at such a focus. Like, it's very much Greg Ginn at his most undistilled as a guitar player. Like these guitar riffs are just raw.
Yeah, you think of something like when TV Party comes on, it's just like it's like a lightning bolt, going through your body. Of course, Rise Above, like again, like punk had been going on through the 70s, but like this new wave of hardcore that they were really ushering in was just faster, meaner, tougher, and that's no disrespect to the 70s bands, but it's just it really feels like a new generation coming to life. And like so much of that, even if you listen to like the instrumentals alone, Greg Ginn was building that foundation that has been built off of so much more since then too.
Yeah.
And this album was our introduction to Henry Rollins, who lives with an incredible legacy and infamy, depending on who you talk to. I will say one thing about Rollins too, as I've been on the record that I really like him, despite, there's been a lot of dumb, shitty things he has done. But going back to the day job thing, I remember seeing a picture of him pre-Black Flag where he's wearing like a Haagen-Dazs uniform.
The infamous Haagen-Dazs photo.
Yes.
Him and Ian MacKaye working at Haagen-Dazs together.
Yes, and it's a good reminder, like you don't just come out of the womb a punk rocker. Sometimes the way the world works and capitalism works forces you into certain paths. But I loved that he kind of just came out of nowhere in that regard. One of the greatest origin stories of him jumping on stage at a Black Flag show in DC and then being like, "Do you want to be our singer now?" And that's kind of how it all started. I just love that serendipity and that willingness to take a leap from Haagen-Dazs to hardcore punk.
Yeah. And man, as we're talking about Rollins being such a divisive figure, he's also such a phenomenal performer. And like, there are a lot of things that he says that I don't agree with. There are a lot of actions he's made that I don't agree with. Like, for instance, I have a Beat Happening tattoo and not the 4 bars of Black Flag tattooed on my body. But that's a story you can check out in the archives on our Beat Happening episode of the Cobain 50. But yeah, like, when I think of Rollins back in the day, I think of him as this hulking, imposing figure on stage, just shirt off, stalking the stage, ready to like body slam somebody.
Yeah. He looks more like someone who would bully a Black Flag fan than like be a Black Flag singer. Which is such a contrast too to like most of the like what you think about punk singers around that time are a lot scrawnier guys.
Scrawny, shrimpy guys. Yeah. I mean, that was, speaking of our archives, that was what Viv Albertine of The Slits said about Johnny Rotten, is that he looked kind of emaciated, and it sort of inspired her to be a punk rock musician.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you think about like, my other contention for favorite singer is Keith Morris, the first Black Flag singer, who is just so good. I think if he'd done more albums with them, he might take the number 1 for me. But it's just those 5 songs, but they're so good. But he's a tiny dude with dreadlocks.
Yeah.
But powerful in his own way. But like having Henry Rollins, who kind of resembled the Hulk, on the stage matching this music, it's just like, as I might say, a vibe shift.
And, when I think about Henry Rollins today, I think about how he is a writer, a critic, a poet. Like he's basically like one of us. He's a radio show host. Like what, like he's venturing into our territory, and it's really cool. But also, like, that makes me think of, like, how a song like Damaged One was his first writing credit with Black Flag. And that kind of started his trajectory into the world of writing, the world of criticism.
Yeah, exactly. And his writing was another part that really got me into him, like reading like Black Coffee Blues and Get in the Van, get out of the van. Sometimes you need to do that too. But yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this on an MDC episode as well, that like in this era of punk rock, there was this like impulse to be contrarian, to do like naughty things, to do things you're not supposed to do. And that trial and error came with a price. Like you have bands using racial slurs, stuff like what happened with Rollins and Calvin Johnson, which is really inexcusable. And I don't want to like gloss over that. But you can see with him, Steve Albini, another one that comes up a lot. You can see like at least with a lot of these dudes, they at least feel like some remorse, or they've tried to pivot away. Again, not excusable what happened in the past, but it's also like encouraging to see that people can grow and change. And now he just listens to like to records on his like $10,000 stereo system or whatever it is. Well, speaking growing and changing over the years, Black Flag certainly changed a lot.
Oh my God.
One of my favorite things to do on Wikipedia is look at bands. Like, do you have those graphics, right, of like members timeline or whatever?
Oh, yeah, the charts, yeah.
The charts. Black Flag has the most fascinating ones. It's like 50 people and they come and go like crazy. Obviously Rollins was the longest serving singer. I can't remember. The dude now is like a skateboarder or something, but yeah, the lineup constantly changes. They're currently like all suing each other. There's just this ongoing beef with the band, which is really sad.
Yeah. What are the lawsuits about? I haven't gotten too far into like the lawsuit lore.
I think there's a lot I'm going to miss or forget, but I know a lot of it's about the ownership of Black Flag, of the name and the logo, which obviously Raymond Pettibon, Greg Ginn's brother, made that logo and all their artwork. But currently, I'm not sure if they're both operating right now, but they were a couple of years ago. There were two different Black Flags.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, there was Black Flag, which was Greg Ginn's thing, which was basically he's the only original member, and then there's Flag, which was like Keith Morris and Dez and a few of these other guys playing Black Flag songs. I think there's a lot more to it too. I know Rollins has his own lawsuits as well. That kind of begs the question: like, can you still be punk while suing your bandmates?
I mean, personally, I feel as though, unless you're a public defender, like being a lawyer is kind of the antithesis of punk.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And it's just kind of a sad end to like, I mean, I know it's still technically going, but what Black Flag represented and like kind of what it evolved into, maybe it just wasn't sustainable when you have that much angst and anger and personality. Greg and Henry being two big personalities. Yeah, it just kind of bums me out. We'll always have these records and these moments and what they represent, but it is kind of a smudge on the legacy, I'd say.
Yeah. And I think it's pretty appropriate to, especially like a lot of the punk bands we've been talking about over the course of this series, how they kind of flame out or sort of just dissipate like slowly over the years, and with a lot of acrimony and bitterness. And, like it's not great. It's sad, but it's also pretty appropriate to punk, I think, to kind of flame out in these sorts of dramatic ways.
Exactly. And I'm glad that they existed when they did. I think like, when I listen to Nirvana or hear Kurt talk, you hear so much of that Black Flag ethos and attitude and work ethic. Like Nirvana may be the other hardest working band of those couple decades.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, their legacy lives on through Nirvana and the countless bands they inspired and more punk bands. But
yeah, I mean, Nirvana didn't put out, I think 14 albums over the course of like 7 or 8 years, but they were road warriors in a very similar sense.
That's true. Well, I could talk about Black Flag all day, but we probably should wrap it up.
This piece was produced by Dusty Henry. Audio was mixed by Roddy Nikpour. Our podcast manager is Isabel Khalili, and Larry Mizell Jr. is our director of editorial.
If you want to do some damage to our donation numbers, you can always make a donation at kexp.org/Cobain. We depend on your support. $6 a month or a one-time $20 donation. It really goes a long way to supporting independent journalism and storytelling here at KEXP and all the other great programs we do here. It is still punk rock to give us your money. So don't worry about that if that's a qualm you have. And we thank you so much for supporting KEXP and the podcast and for making this all possible. With that, I'm Dusty Henry.
And I'm Martin Douglas. We'll see you next week on the Cobain 50 from listener-powered KEXP, where the music matters. $20 is enough to buy me a six-pack, so just keep that in mind.
In this economy?